You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just living without a clear purpose. And it's slowly killing you. That feeling of waking up, tired even after 8 hours of sleep, the constant scrolling, the overthinking, the feeling that nothing really excites you anymore. That's not normal. That's a life drifting without direction. And if you don't fix it, it only gets worse. More anxiety, more regret, more years wasted, chasing things that mean nothing. But here's the truth. No one told you. Your purpose isn't out there hiding. It's not waiting for you in a job title, a relationship, or a lucky break. It's already inside you, buried under distractions, fears, and lies you've been told your whole life. And right now, we're going to uncover it. With the ancient power of Stoic philosophy, you'll learn what Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus knew, that life has meaning only when you know your role in it. And once you find it, everything changes. You stop chasing and start living. So if you've been feeling stuck, empty, or lost, stay with me. Because by the end of these 2 hours, you won't just know what your purpose is. You'll feel it in your bones. This is the lesson you've been waiting for. Let's begin. There's a quiet truth that Stoic philosophy reveals, one that's been buried under the noise of modern life, lost behind slogans like, "Just be yourself," or "Find your passion." And the truth is this: you already have a direction. You were born with it. Not a fixed path, but a natural alignment, like a river that knows which way to flow if you stop trying to dam it up. The ancient Stoics called this process oikoiosis. It's not just a fancy Greek word. It's the foundation of how a human being finds their purpose. At its core, oikoiosis is the act of appropriating what is truly yours, growing into harmony with your own nature, not the ego, not the mask, not the roles you've been playing to please others, but the essence of who you are and what you are made for. That might sound abstract, but it's not. In fact, it's the most grounded thing in the world, because it starts with what's already real about you. From the moment you were born, you've been in this unfolding process, first seeking what's necessary to survive, then expanding your care outward, to family, to friends, to society. Each layer pulling you deeper into a sense of self and belonging. But somewhere along the way, most people stop. They get stuck in survival mode, trapped in jobs, identities, and habits that don't match who they are. And without even realizing it, they drift far from their center. That's when the symptoms show up. Emptiness, burnout, a constant sense that something's missing, no matter how much they achieve. Because the truth is, you can't find your life's purpose by stacking up accomplishments that were never meant for you. You can only find it by aligning more closely with your own nature, by becoming more yourself, not less. Oikoiosis means peeling away everything false, everything forced, and returning to what is proper to you. It starts with deep self-recognition, not in a self-help book, not in a career personality test, but in the stillness of your own attention. Ask yourself, what feels right when everything else is quiet? What kind of work, what kind of effort makes you feel most alive, even when it's hard? What values feel like home, not because someone taught them to you, but because they resonate deep in your bones? This isn't about surface-level preferences, it's about essence. Marcus Aurelius didn't tell himself to chase success or influence. He told himself to fulfill his role as a human being, rational, social, and made for virtue. And every decision he made, every act of discipline, every moment of restraint, flowed from that foundation. Seneca reminded us that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But you suffer even more when you don't know who is suffering, when you don't know yourself. And Epictetus? He was born a slave. He had no wealth, no freedom, no privilege. But he discovered that he had something more powerful, an understanding of what belonged to him and what didn't, of what he could control and what was outside his nature. That's oikeiosis in action. It's not passive acceptance. It's active alignment. It means waking up and asking, what would a human meant to be me do today? Not what would make me look good, not what would get me applause, but what would make me feel real in the deepest, most grounded sense of the word. This idea of belonging to yourself is radical in a world that teaches you to belong to everything else, to a brand, to a lifestyle, to someone else's expectations. But here's the hard truth. As long as you're living someone else's life, even if it's successful, you'll feel empty, because you'll always be disconnected from your own thread. That's why so many people who seem to have it all still feel like they have nothing. Because purpose isn't about having more. It's about being in harmony with who you are and what you're here to do. And harmony doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for validation. It whispers. It comes through stillness, through self-awareness, through radical honesty. Here's what most people miss. Your nature isn't just some abstract concept. It's deeply practical. Are you someone who thrives when teaching others? Are you built to protect, to heal, to create, to solve, to serve? Not because those things sound good on paper, but because they pull you forward with a quiet force you can't explain. That's your inner compass. And when you ignore it, life becomes noise. But when you follow it, when you lean into oikeiosis, you start to experience a strange clarity. Decisions become simpler. Motivation becomes steady. Even the hardest days have meaning because you know you're not drifting, you're building. The Stoics didn't waste time pretending they could be anything. They believed in becoming what they were. It takes courage to walk that path, to stop chasing borrowed dreams, to look in the mirror and admit, this is who I am, and that's enough, if I live it fully. But when you do that, your energy changes. You stop needing permission. You stop comparing. You stop apologizing for your uniqueness, and you start owning it. And that's when purpose begins to rise, not as a job title, not as a grand mission, but as a daily way of being. It's not about waiting for clarity. It's about moving toward it by becoming more yourself every day. Look closely and you'll see. Your body, your temperament, your talents, your struggles, they're not random. They're hints, clues pointing you toward what is proper to you. They're not barriers to your purpose. They're ingredients. So stop rejecting your nature. Stop fighting the way you're wired. Start refining it. Start working with yourself, not against yourself. That's the hidden power of oikeiosis. It's not just a mental shift. It's a return to source. Because once you fully belong to yourself, you no longer need to chase purpose in the world. You carry it wherever you go. And from that place, you begin to build a life that feels like it was always meant to be yours. Because it was. But even when you know yourself deeply, when you've begun to align with your true nature, life doesn't suddenly get easier. You'll still face setbacks. You'll still run into pain. You'll still have days where everything feels unfair. And this is where most people give up. They think, if I'm on the right path, why is it so hard? But the Stoics knew better. They knew that your path isn't proven by how smooth it is. It's proven by how you respond when it breaks you open. Because some of your greatest breakthroughs won't come from clarity. They'll come from chaos. There's a strength the world rarely teaches. It doesn't look like confidence or success or constant positivity. It looks like being at peace with what is. That strength is called amor fati. It means love of fate, not just tolerating what happens, not just enduring it, but learning to embrace it fully, especially the parts that feel unfair, unwanted, or out of your control. This isn't about pretending bad things are good. It's about shifting your relationship with reality, so you stop resisting it and start using it. Pain doesn't become your identity, it becomes your teacher. Because when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" everything changes. You stop being a victim of life, and you start becoming a student of it. Marcus Aurelius buried 8 of his children. He ruled during war, famine, and plague. He could have crumbled under the weight of that pain. Instead, he wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." That's amor fati. It's not cold. It's not passive. It's fiercely alive. It's a decision to take every blow, every loss, every failure, and turn it into fuel. Not because it's easy, but because what's the alternative? Wishing reality was different won't change it. Trying to reverse time won't fix it. But using it, that's where power begins. This kind of acceptance isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's the decision to stand in the middle of a storm and say, "This isn't what I wanted, but it's what I have, so I'll make it count." Amor fati turns setbacks into strategy. It teaches you to adapt without losing direction, to suffer without losing dignity, to lose without losing your identity. Because your purpose isn't threatened by pain, it's revealed through it. Think about the moments in your life that shaped you most. Were they the easy ones, the convenient ones, or the ones that broke you open, forced you to rebuild, and left you with new eyes? This isn't romanticizing struggle. It's recognizing that struggle is inevitable. And if it's inevitable, the wisest thing you can do is make it serve you. The Stoics trained for this. They practiced loss in their minds before it happened. They anticipated discomfort. They imagined being exiled, betrayed, bankrupted, humiliated, and then asked, "Could I still live well, even then?" Because if you can love your fate, you can't be broken by it. And if you can't be broken, you're free. Most people live in fear of what might happen. They plan their lives around avoiding pain, avoiding rejection, avoiding failure. But the cost of that fear is purpose, because purpose requires risk. It requires contact with the real world, with all its sharp edges. So if you want to walk a path that matters, you must accept that pain is part of the price. But once you stop fighting that pain, it stops owning you. Instead of saying, "This shouldn't have happened," you begin to ask, "What is this teaching me? How can this sharpen me? How does this make me stronger, wiser, clearer about what truly matters?" Because amor fati isn't passive suffering, it's active transformation. It's turning bitterness into discipline, grief into gratitude, obstacles into openings. It doesn't mean you never feel sadness or anger or disappointment. It means you don't stop at those emotions. You use them. You build with them. And over time, your brain rewires. You start seeing the world differently, not as something happening to you, but something happening for your growth, even when it hurts. This rewiring changes your instincts. Where others see dead ends, you see pivots. Where others collapse under hardship, you gain clarity. That's how you align with what you're truly meant for. Not by walking a painless path, but by walking a purposeful one. A path you know is yours, even when it tests you, especially when it tests you. The hard moments aren't distractions from your purpose. They're part of the sharpening process, the grinding that reveals your edge. Some people wait their whole lives for the right moment, the moment when everything is perfect. But that moment never comes, and while they wait, life moves on. Time passes, energy fades, and all that potential stays locked inside them. But you're not waiting anymore. You're learning to love the chaos, to embrace the timing you didn't choose, to see hardship as training, not punishment. That's the paradox of amor fati. The more you lean into what you can't control, the more powerful you become. You start saying yes to the moment you're in without needing it to be different. You stop bargaining with the past. You stop running from discomfort. And in that stillness, your real power returns. This power isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream, "Look at me." It whispers, "I'm still here, still standing, still building." And every time life tries to knock you down, you don't just survive it. You integrate it. You use it. You let it shape you, not into someone bitter or afraid, but into someone unshakably rooted in who they are. This is where purpose becomes real, not as something you chase, but as something you live, no matter the circumstances. Not as a fantasy in your head, but as a rhythm in your bones. Because when you no longer need life to go your way in order to stay on your path, you've won. You've already won. You're no longer trapped by what if. You're moved by what is. And in that shift, you unlock something rare. Peace that isn't fragile. Direction that doesn't depend on outside approval. A purpose that carries you, not the other way around. So the next time life throws you into a situation you didn't ask for, remember amor fati, not as a concept, but as a choice. A choice to love the reality in front of you, to face it, to shape it, to let it make you into someone capable of carrying the mission you were born to fulfill. Because you weren't made to avoid the fire. You were made to burn through it and rise stronger. You've learned to face hardship without fear. You've stopped running from the difficult parts of your story. But even now, another trap waits for you, one that's harder to see because the world celebrates it. It doesn't show up as pain. It shows up as applause, as validation, as shiny rewards that look like progress but quietly pull you off track. This is the next test, because the greatest threat to your purpose isn't always failure. Sometimes it's success. If you're not careful, status becomes the substitute for meaning. You hit goals, collect titles, grow your following, make more money, and yet there's still that emptiness, that ache that says, "This isn't it." The Stoics understood this long before modern society turned comparison into a lifestyle. They called these things externals, not because they don't exist, but because they don't define you. They are outside your control. They are outside your character. They are outside your purpose. The world will always tell you that purpose looks like climbing the ladder. But what good is a ladder if it's leaning against the wrong wall? Everywhere you look, people are chasing things that don't last. Trophies, likes, recognition, reputation, all of it designed to keep you moving without ever asking why. And the faster you run, the easier it is to confuse attention with direction. The Stoic response? Radical indifference, not numbness, not apathy, but a calm, clear refusal to be ruled by things that don't truly matter. This kind of indifference is not weakness. It's strength in its cleanest form. It's the ability to stay centered while the world tries to pull you in every direction. Purpose doesn't grow in noise. It grows in silence. And when you're constantly seeking approval, there's no space to hear your own voice. You don't have to reject success. You just have to stop needing it, because the moment you need it, it owns you. And once it owns you, you'll twist yourself to keep it. You'll make choices based on optics, not truth. You'll play roles instead of showing up as yourself. And here's where most people get stuck. They start doing things that once felt meaningful, but over time they become performance. They shift from contribution to self-preservation. They work to maintain the image of purpose, not the reality. That's what happens when you attach your identity to outcomes. You get lost in proving instead of becoming. The Stoics never said ambition was wrong, but they warned, let it be guided by virtue, not vanity. Let it be shaped by values, not by hunger for status. Because status is borrowed, it comes from others. But purpose? Purpose is yours. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away unless you hand it over. When you let go of needing to be seen, you start acting from something deeper. You choose the right action, not the rewarded one. You speak the truth, not the popular line. You start doing the work that your soul recognizes, even if no one claps for it. That's the irony. The moment you become indifferent to recognition is often when your work becomes most meaningful, not because others say so, but because you feel it. You know you're aligned, and that alignment becomes a kind of inner wealth no paycheck can match. Indifference to externals doesn't mean you don't care about results. It means you care more about who you are while creating them. You could be rich and lost, famous and empty, respected and miserable. That's the risk of living for the external. The more you chase it, the more you forget how to live without it. So the Stoic trains not to avoid externals, but to detach from them, to touch them without being trapped by them, to hold success in open hands, knowing it may come and go, but their center stays firm. This practice of indifference builds clarity. It strips away distraction. It reveals what matters by taking away what doesn't. Think of a sculptor. She doesn't create by adding more. She creates by removing what doesn't belong. That's what you're doing every time you choose meaning over image, every time you act without needing applause, every time you follow your path even when it's quiet. That's how your purpose becomes unmistakable, not louder, but sharper. If you've ever felt like you were doing everything right, but still felt disconnected, this is why. You were doing what the world told you to do, but you weren't doing what you're here to do. And you can't find that by copying someone else's definition of success. You can only find it by letting go of the pressure to impress. Here's the question the Stoics would ask you. If no one ever praised you for it, would you still do it? Would you still write? Would you still lead? Would you still teach, or build, or serve? Would you still wake up and show up, even if the world wasn't watching? That's the test. That's how you know it's real. When you reach that level of clarity, when your work becomes an expression of who you are rather than a strategy to be seen, everything gets lighter. There's less noise, less confusion, more peace. You're no longer swinging between doubt and validation. You're anchored, not because you know the whole plan, but because you're moving from integrity. And integrity doesn't need permission. It just needs practice. This is why indifference is so powerful. It's not about caring less. It's about caring correctly, about shifting your energy from outcomes you can't control to values that never change. It means trading the rush of external winds for the deep calm of inner alignment. That's a hard trade for most people, because we're wired to seek reward. We're raised to perform. But the Stoic path is about retraining that instinct, about slowly choosing stillness over spectacle, depth over distraction, substance over image. And the reward? It's not flashy, but it's lasting. You wake up with a quiet fire, a direction that isn't swayed by what people think of you today, a confidence that doesn't need to be proved, a sense of enough, even when there's more to do. You begin to define success not by how high you climb, but by how closely your actions match your principles. And in that shift, purpose becomes simple. It's not something to chase. It's something you live. So let go of the applause. Let go of the metrics. Let go of the shiny distractions dressed up as dreams. Strip it all back until only the essential remains. Ask yourself, right now, if I didn't need anyone's approval, what would I give my life to? That's where your purpose lives. And the less you cling to what doesn't matter, the clearer it becomes. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be praised. You don't need to be remembered in history books. You just need to be aligned, present, honest, useful, fully engaged in the role life gave you. And once you reach that place, you'll realize something most people never do. You were never lost. You were just distracted. You were never broken. You were just too busy chasing the wrong things. And now that you've let go, you can finally see what's been here all along. Once you stop chasing approval, and once you learn to stand firm in your values without needing the world to cheer you on, something even more powerful starts to happen. You begin to crave clarity. Not about what looks good, not about what people admire, but about what really matters. What's worth it? What's worth giving your time to? What's worth giving your whole life to? And that's where most people hesitate, because they've never stopped to ask how short life really is. We avoid the thought. We push it aside. We distract ourselves. But deep down, there's a truth we all carry, and the Stoics didn't run from it. They embraced it. They turned toward it daily because they knew it wasn't darkness. It was direction. Memento mori. Remember that you must die. 3 words that changed the way the Stoics lived, worked, spoke, forgave, created, and served. 3 words that, when taken seriously, cut through every excuse and force you to ask the one question most people avoid their entire lives. Am I living like my time matters? Because there is no clearer compass for purpose than death. Nothing strips away illusions faster. Nothing clears the fog like realizing that you don't have forever. It's not morbid. It's not negative. It's grounding. The reason people waste time is because they think they have more of it. But when you bring death close, not in fear, but in awareness, you see your priorities rearrange themselves. You stop negotiating with your soul. You stop pushing things to someday. You stop tolerating things that drain you. You stop pretending you have the luxury of waiting. You only get one life, one timeline, and you don't control how long it lasts. That reality is not meant to scare you. It's meant to sharpen you. The Stoics used this truth as fuel. They would wake up and remind themselves, today could be the last. Not to be reckless, but to be real. To put urgency into what matters and silence into what doesn't. Because you only start living fully when you're no longer pretending death is far away. When you start seeing every moment as something you won't get back, everything begins to shift. Your conversations become deeper. Your work becomes more focused. Your forgiveness comes faster. Your presence becomes sharper. There's no time for half-living, no space for distractions that drain you, no patience for roles you're playing just to please people who won't even be at your funeral. Think about how much energy people give to things they'd forget if they knew they had 1 week left to live. The argument, the ego, the comparison, the empty goals, the things done out of obligation instead of purpose. But when you remember death daily, those things start to fall away. They lose their grip on you, not because they're solved, but because they're revealed to be insignificant. That's what this practice does. It burns away the noise, not through fear, but through focus. It's easy to lie to yourself when you think you have endless time. It's easy to procrastinate on your dreams, to tolerate a job that drains you, to wait to say the thing you need to say. But once you start bringing death into your awareness, all of that gets harder to ignore. You start to ask better questions. If this were my last week, would I be proud of how I showed up today? If this were my final year, what would I regret not doing? What would I regret wasting time on? These questions aren't about gloom. They're about alignment, because your purpose hides behind the false urgency of the world. But death flips that. It shows you what's actually urgent and what never was. And when you start living like your time matters, people feel it. You become more present in every room. You say what's real. You don't water yourself down. You speak from your values. You choose meaning over momentum. You stop measuring life by how fast you're moving and start asking where you're actually going. Most people let fear of death shrink their lives, but the Stoics did the opposite. They let it expand their lives. Because when you realize how short it is, you finally start asking what it's for. Death isn't the enemy of purpose. It's the mirror that reflects it. Without that mirror, we forget. We drift. We act like we'll always have tomorrow. But when you look into that mirror every day, your decisions change. You don't wait for permission. You don't wait for certainty. You don't wait for a sign. You just begin. Because you know waiting has a cost. When Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, he constantly reminded his own mind that death was coming, not to scare himself, but to sharpen his choices. He knew that without death in view, the ego runs wild. Desires take over. Distractions multiply. But when you see life as finite, you become more selective, more present, more real. Seneca wrote that life is long if you know how to use it. The problem isn't time, it's what you fill it with. And nothing makes you more conscious of that than remembering that you don't have forever to figure it out. This discipline also brings peace, because when you accept death, you stop fearing it. You stop trying to outrun it with more money, more possessions, more noise. You stop pretending that you can find your purpose in the next achievement, and instead, you start living it now, not next year, not when you feel ready, now. You realize your purpose isn't something you get to after you fix everything. It's something you can live today, flawed, uncertain, but real. You don't need everything in place. You just need presence, courage, honesty, a willingness to act like your life is the one chance you get, because it is. Memento mori also humbles you. It reminds you that your story will end, no matter how important you think you are. And that's a gift, because when you take yourself too seriously, you forget how to live. But when you remember that death comes for all, kings, philosophers, leaders, strangers, it frees you from the pressure to impress. It frees you to focus on what actually matters. You stop living for legacy and start living for impact. Not in history books, but in the lives you touch now, the people you love now, the work you do now. This moment is your legacy. Not the idea of a name being remembered, but the feeling you bring to others today. When you die, all your possessions, all your status, all your plans vanish. But what won't vanish is the example you set, the energy you gave, the truth you stood in. That's what lasts, not in the world, but in the echo of every life you touched. Memento mori puts your feet on the ground. It ends the illusion that you have time to waste. It kills excuses. It removes the need for perfection. It forces you to act with urgency and love with intention. This isn't about being fearless. It's about being clear. And when you're clear, you don't need motivation. You're moved by something deeper. You're moved by truth. So when you wake up tomorrow, ask yourself, not what you have to do, but what you would choose to do if this day was your last. And if the answer feels off, If the way you're living doesn't reflect what matters most, don't wait for permission to realign. Start cutting the noise. Start saying the thing. Start doing the work. Start living like your time matters, because it does. Memento mori isn't just a phrase, it's a compass, a daily practice that cuts through everything false, every distraction, every delay, every excuse. It doesn't scare you, it wakes you up. And once you're awake, you stop asking what your purpose is. You start living like you already know. When you start living with the awareness that time is limited, your priorities shift. You no longer waste energy on what doesn't matter. You don't get caught in overthinking. You stop waiting for perfect moments. Death becomes your clearest mirror, showing you what needs to go, what needs to grow, and what needs your full attention now. But even when you see what matters, the next question rises. What do I do with this clarity? How do you take the raw urgency of a short life and turn it into something meaningful? How do you keep yourself from slipping back into passivity, into waiting, into wandering? The answer lies in one word the Stoics built everything around: eudaimonia. Most people treat purpose like it's one destination, one moment, one big goal they're supposed to find and commit their life to. But that idea makes people stuck. It makes them believe they can't live with meaning until they've figured everything out. So they wait, and the waiting becomes a life. The Stoics never saw purpose that way. They didn't treat it like a treasure at the end of a map. They saw it as a way of living, not something you find, but something you do. Eudaimonia wasn't a future reward. It was the active state of living in alignment with virtue. It was being excellent at being human, on purpose, through action, in every choice. You don't need to wait until your path is clear. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You don't need a title, a job, or a grand vision. You need one decision: to live according to your highest values today, right now, this moment. And what are those values? For the Stoics, they were simple and unchanging: wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. 4 principles that shape everything else. 4 anchors that keep you steady in chaos. When you live by those, you're living with purpose, whether or not you can see the big picture. Eudaimonia is not a mood. It's not a feeling. It's not about happiness in the way people use the word today. It's not soft. It's not fleeting. It's a state of harmony between what you believe and what you do. It's when your actions rise to match your character. It's when you no longer betray yourself, even in the small things. That's why the Stoics didn't chase motivation. They didn't rely on inspiration. They focused on action, consistent, ethical, intentional action, because every right choice is a brick, and over time, those bricks build a life that feels whole. Eudaimonia is not something you achieve once. It's something you practice daily. You don't get there, you live it. You build it moment by moment, habit by habit, decision by decision. This way of thinking frees you. It takes off the pressure to figure everything out. You don't need to know your full purpose. You just need to know how to act with purpose now. The rest reveals itself through motion. That's the Stoic path. Not standing still, waiting for direction, but moving in alignment with virtue, knowing that every right step takes you deeper into who you are. People waste years waiting for clarity, trying to think their way into purpose. But the Stoics knew that purpose isn't found through thinking alone. It's revealed through action. You don't wait to be useful. You become useful. You don't wait to feel certain. You act from your current understanding and refine as you go. This approach builds trust with yourself. Every time you take a virtuous step, even if it's small, you prove to yourself that you're reliable. And the more you trust yourself, the clearer your direction becomes. You don't second-guess every move. You don't paralyze yourself with options. You start to know what kind of person you are because you've shown yourself again and again. Eudaimonia is the opposite of drifting. It's rooted in presence. You ask in every moment, not, "What do I want?" but, "What is the right thing to do here?" Not, "What brings me comfort?" but, "What builds my character?" The world tells you to chase goals, achievements, status, but those things can be taken from you. Purpose built on virtue can't. It lives in your choices, not in your resume. It lives in how you speak, how you listen, how you carry yourself when no one's watching. The world says, "Be happy." The Stoics say, "Be whole." And wholeness doesn't come from chasing feelings. It comes from alignment. When who you are, what you believe, and how you act all line up, something inside you settles. You're no longer at war with yourself. You don't need external proof. You don't need a perfect path. You just need to keep choosing what's right. This also means purpose is available to everyone. You don't need talent. You don't need connections. You don't need approval. You just need commitment to living with integrity. Whether you're a ruler or a janitor, a writer or a teacher, a parent or a soldier, it doesn't matter. Your value comes from how you live, not what you're labeled as. That's why Marcus Aurelius could be emperor and still struggle. Why Epictetus could be a slave and still be free. Because purpose isn't about power, it's about principle. When you start living this way, you stop asking, "What am I supposed to do with my life?" and start asking, "What does life require of me today?" And that shift changes everything. You stop living in the abstract. You stop chasing clarity like it's a prize. You bring purpose into the room with your presence, your honesty, your courage. There's a kind of quiet power that grows from this. You stop rushing. You stop comparing. You start showing up, fully, even in uncertainty, even in difficulty, especially in difficulty, because that's where virtue sharpens. That's where you find out what you're made of, not by running, but by choosing what's right, even when it costs you. Eudaimonia also helps you course correct. You don't need to spiral when you make a mistake. You simply return to right action. No drama, no guilt loops, just adjustment. That's the strength of living by principles. It gives you a way back, always. And here's something most people miss. When you live like this, you feel alive. Not because everything's easy, but because everything's meaningful. Even the hard days have depth. Even the losses teach you something. Even the boring tasks become part of a bigger picture. You start to see that your life is already your purpose, not in some romantic way, but in the way you choose to show up in each moment, each role, each interaction. And this approach removes the pressure to be extraordinary. You don't need to do one massive thing. You need to do the next right thing, over and over. That's what builds a life that matters. The world loves extremes, loud success, grand visions. But the Stoic knows that greatness lives in repetition, in the quiet, unseen discipline of right action, done without fanfare, without needing praise. You won't always feel inspired, you won't always be clear. But when you commit to living in alignment with your values, you give yourself something most people never find: consistency. And from that consistency, real confidence grows. Not ego, not bravado, but a steady belief that you can handle what comes because you know who you are and how you choose to live. Eudaimonia turns life into a practice, not a project to finish, but a rhythm to step into. And the more you step, the more you align. The more you align, the more your path unfolds, not through force, but through faithfulness to the moment in front of you. That's the Stoic way. That's how you turn clarity into action. That's how you stop waiting for purpose and start being it. When you stop treating purpose like a finish line and start living it through consistent right action, something powerful starts to build: clarity, confidence, and a grounded sense of meaning. You stop waiting for a perfect calling. You stop searching for identity in titles or outcomes. You begin to understand that the real path is built moment by moment, choice by choice. But even now, there's one final myth that can still pull you off course: the obsession with passion. The modern world worships passion. It tells you to follow your heart at all costs, that you'll know it's right when it feels exciting, that if you just do what you love, everything else will fall into place. But the Stoics saw danger in that mindset. They didn't reject enthusiasm or energy. They rejected the idea of being led by it. To them, passion was unstable, unreliable, temporary, and anything temporary can't serve as the foundation of a meaningful life. When people hear "follow your passion," they imagine a kind of constant fire, a wave of emotion that makes work easy and life joyful. But passion, by its very nature, fluctuates. It rises and falls with mood, circumstance, energy, and ego. And when you tie your purpose to something so inconsistent, your direction becomes fragile. You feel aligned when it burns bright, and lost when it fades. That's not how the Stoics lived. They valued clarity over excitement, reason over emotional impulse. They knew that your purpose needs more than feeling. It needs structure. It needs service. It needs discipline. Because the truth is, passion can lie to you. It can pull you toward things that feel good in the moment, but leave you hollow in the long run. It can tempt you into thinking your purpose is about self-expression when it's really about contribution. It can convince you that you've found your calling when what you've really found is a high, and highs don't last. The Stoics taught that real purpose comes from alignment with nature, your own and the world's. It comes from stepping into your role, fulfilling your responsibilities, developing your character. That doesn't mean there's no room for passion, but it means passion isn't the compass. It's just a tool, something you can use, but not something you should follow blindly. Think of it this way: if your work excites you but does nothing for others, is it still purpose? If it energizes you but doesn't build anything meaningful, is it worth the pursuit? Passion without direction can lead you away from who you're meant to become. It can trap you in cycles of starting and quitting, always looking for the next rush. And in the meantime, the deeper work that may not always feel thrilling, gets ignored. That's why the Stoics trusted reason. They believed your choices should be guided by what's right, not by what's fun, by what serves, not what seduces. They didn't dismiss emotion entirely, but they never let it drive. There's a cost to chasing passion as if it's purpose. The cost is consistency. The cost is clarity. The cost is long-term fulfillment. Passion makes you reactive. It makes you chase novelty. It pulls your energy in 10 different directions, and you wake up one day wondering why you're exhausted and unfulfilled, even though you were doing what you loved. But love isn't enough, not in the way people think. The Stoics would ask, does this pursuit make you more virtuous? Does it build you into someone stronger, wiser, more useful? Does it deepen your connection to others? Does it align with reason and values? Because if it doesn't, it's not purpose, it's entertainment. They saw passion as a fire to be used carefully. It can power great things, but left unchecked, it burns down everything around it. The goal isn't to kill your passion, it's to master it, to bring it into alignment with reason, so it works for you, not against you. That kind of control is rare. It requires honesty. You have to ask if what excites you is just an escape, if your dream is actually service or just ego in disguise, if you're chasing something because it truly matters or because you want the feeling it gives you. The Stoics knew that clarity only comes when emotion steps aside and reason takes the lead. Not cold logic, not lifeless decisions, but wisdom grounded in what's real. And here's what's real. Meaningful work is not always thrilling. It's often repetitive, often tiring, often quiet. But when it's rooted in values, it gives you a kind of energy that passion alone never could. It's not the spike of excitement, it's the steady rhythm of fulfillment. This is why many people feel empty even while doing what they thought they loved, because they tied their sense of purpose to stimulation instead of meaning. They thought the feeling would last forever. They didn't plan for the days when it wouldn't. But meaning is stronger than mood. When your direction is built on reason-guided purpose, you don't collapse when the feelings fade. You keep showing up, because you're not chasing energy. You're building something that lasts. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, not your impulses, but your reasoned nature. The part of you that knows what's right, even when it's hard. The part that doesn't need the emotional high to keep going. The part that stays committed when the path gets steep. When you make that your foundation, passion becomes something you channel, not something you serve. It becomes fuel, not direction. This mindset also protects you from confusion. So many people get stuck because they can't find their passion. They think something's wrong with them, that they're lost, that they're broken. But the problem isn't a lack of passion, it's a lack of perspective. The Stoics didn't sit around waiting to feel inspired. They got to work, they took action. They asked what needed to be done and did it well. And in doing so, they found clarity, not in theory, but in motion. You don't need to feel passion to live with purpose. You need values. You need courage. You need the discipline to act from what matters, not just from what moves you emotionally. And when you live like this, something strange happens. You begin to feel a different kind of passion, one that isn't dependent on external results. It's a deep, internal fire that comes from knowing you're living rightly, that you're building something honest, that you're not wasting your life chasing feelings that don't last. This passion doesn't fade when things get hard. It doesn't need applause to keep going. It's not based on excitement. It's based on alignment. And alignment is something you build through effort, through patience, through quiet consistency. So the next time you feel unsure about your direction, don't ask, "What excites me most?" Ask, "What would be the right thing to commit to, even if it stopped being exciting?" Ask, "What kind of work helps others, strengthens my character, and aligns with my values?" Let passion show up if it wants to, but don't build your life around it. Build your life around purpose, around what endures, around what makes you resilient, not just thrilled. Because the life you're meant to live isn't waiting at the end of your feelings. It's waiting at the end of your reasoned action. And once you stop chasing the rush and start choosing what's right, you'll find something better than passion. You'll find peace. When you stop chasing fleeting feelings and start building a life grounded in reason, you begin to feel something stronger than excitement, responsibility. Not a burden, but a call. A deeper pull that doesn't ask what makes you feel good, but what you've been entrusted to carry. This is where real purpose starts to take shape, not in what you want, but in what you're meant to give. Not in chasing passion, but in fulfilling your roles. The Stoics understood something most people overlook. They knew that the question, "What do I want from life?" was far less important than the question, "What does life expect from me?" This is why Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, didn't write about power, wealth, or pleasure. He wrote about duty, over and over again. What is my duty as a human, as a father, as a citizen, as a leader? Because duty was not just a task to him, it was identity. And when you see your life through the lens of your roles, purpose stops being an abstract mystery. It becomes something visible, something real, something rooted in action. Everyone is born into a web of roles. You don't have to earn them. They're part of your existence. You are someone's son or daughter, someone's friend, someone's neighbor, eventually someone's mentor, someone's guide, someone who shapes the world around them in quiet ways every day. And each of these roles carries weight, not pressure, but significance. We're conditioned to look outward for meaning, to pursue individual dreams, to follow our desires. But when desire becomes the compass, we lose sight of where we actually are. We chase what excites us and miss what needs us. And the truth is, we are always most alive when we step into the responsibilities that only we can fulfill. This is why duty matters, because it ties you to something larger than yourself. It forces you to ask better questions, not "What will bring me success?" but "Who is counting on me?" Not "What do I feel like doing?" but "What needs to be done?" When you begin to map your roles and give them the attention they deserve, your path begins to reveal itself. Because in honoring each role, you develop the virtues required to become whole. Patience when you're a parent, courage when you're a leader, integrity when you're a friend, justice when you serve others. These aren't traits you simply discover. They're forged in the doing. Most people wait for a grand purpose to arrive before they start acting with meaning. But the Stoics knew it works the other way. Step into your duties and meaning arrives. Do what is needed in the moment, and clarity grows. Fulfill what is in front of you, and the next step appears. Your roles aren't random. They are your training ground. They shape your instincts. They refine your thinking. They teach you to show up, not just when it's easy, but when it's required. And in showing up again and again, you find what you're really made of. Many people avoid this path because it isn't glamorous. It doesn't always come with praise. It doesn't promise fast rewards. But what it offers is depth, quiet strength, a deep connection to the life you're already living and the people already around you. The modern world encourages self-focus. The Stoics encouraged self-awareness. Self-awareness leads to duty, because when you truly know yourself, you know your place in the world, not in terms of status, but in terms of responsibility. You stop seeing yourself as the center and start seeing yourself as a part of a whole, a family, a team, a society. And in that shift, everything changes. You begin to understand that your value isn't found in what you achieve for yourself, but in how faithfully you serve within your roles. That means taking care of your health, not just for your sake, but for those who rely on you. That means giving your attention to conversations, not because you feel like it, but because your presence matters. That means doing the hard thing, not to prove something, but because someone must. This doesn't mean you lose yourself in service. It means you find yourself there, because your character doesn't grow in isolation. It grows through interaction, through responsibility, through the choice to uphold your role even when no one else is watching. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask if his duties were enjoyable. He asked if they were right. He didn't pursue his personal desires. He fulfilled his obligations, even when he was exhausted, even when he was in pain. and through that he became someone worthy of trust, someone stable in crisis, someone who could lead not because he wanted power, but because he carried purpose. Your life is already full of roles waiting to be fulfilled, and if you avoid them in search of freedom, you'll miss the path to real freedom, the kind that comes from doing what's right, not what's easy. Because when you do what is necessary, when you carry what is yours, you become unshakable. Your life gains structure. Your choices gain weight. Your days gain meaning. Duty transforms ordinary moments into sacred ones. A simple conversation becomes a chance to uplift. A small act becomes a lesson in service. An inconvenience becomes a moment to practice humility. You no longer need grand gestures to feel purposeful. You find it in the everyday. Because when your roles are honored, your life becomes aligned. This mindset also removes confusion. When you don't know what to do, look to your role. Ask what is expected of you, not by society, but by virtue. Ask what the best version of yourself would do in that role. And do that, not for approval, but because it's right. This practice doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, attention, willingness to step in, and the more you act from duty, the more clear you become. You stop floating, you stop bouncing between desires, you find a rhythm, a steadiness, a deeper connection to your own life. And here's what's most powerful. Duty leads to identity. You become someone you respect, not because you followed your desires, but because you answered your call, not because you chased dreams, but because you showed up fully to what was already yours to carry. The Stoics knew that the highest life isn't the one that feels the best. It's the one that contributes the most, not in public ways, but in quiet consistency, in roles well played, in responsibilities well held. So when you feel lost, don't look further. Look closer. Ask what role you're in right now. Ask what it demands from you. Ask how you can meet that demand with virtue. That's the path. That's your function. That's how you find your place in the world, not by asking what you want from life, but what life wants from you, and then answering that call with everything you have. When you begin living from duty, something inside you becomes stronger. You stop chasing feelings and start living from principle. You move with intention, not impulse. But as that foundation forms, there's something else you need, something without which all your clarity, your virtue, your responsibility can collapse under pressure. You need inner strength, the kind that doesn't come from motivation or mood, the kind that holds when everything outside of you starts to fall apart. Before the Stoics searched for meaning, they built that strength. They called it the inner citadel, a mental fortress no one could break into, no matter what storms came. This was the core of their philosophy. Before you try to serve the world, before you try to fix your life, before you reach for purpose, you need to be rooted in something unshakable. Without it, you'll get pulled off course by every setback, every insult, every fear, every craving. You'll try to live with meaning, but your emotions will keep hijacking your direction. You'll try to stay aligned, but approval or criticism will knock you off balance. The inner citadel is where that stops. It's not a wall that shuts the world out. It's a center that keeps you anchored in it. It's built from self-knowledge, emotional discipline, and deep internal clarity. It's not built in a single moment of insight. It's formed through thousands of small decisions to think, act, and respond from within. You start by recognizing what's truly yours. That's the first wall of the citadel. You don't control what people say. You don't control outcomes. You don't control the behavior of others. But you do control your responses. You control your beliefs. You control your choices. The more you focus on what is within your power, the stronger your foundation becomes. You waste less energy on things you cannot influence. You become harder to provoke. You stop reacting and start choosing. The Stoics taught that true freedom is found in this space between stimulus and response. You don't need the world to be perfect. You just need to hold your own shape. And that shape is built by deciding, over and over, to choose reason over reaction. The next part of the citadel is emotional clarity, not suppression, clarity. You can't build a strong mind by pretending you don't feel, but you also can't be led by feelings that lie to you. The Stoics didn't fear emotion. They studied it. They watched their anger, their envy, their fear, like a scientist observing a fire, not someone throwing themselves into the flames. They asked, "What is this emotion trying to teach me? What value does it protect? What false belief is feeding it?" That's how you stop being owned by your emotions. You stop judging yourself for feeling and start training yourself to respond with wisdom. That builds the second wall of your citadel, emotional self-sufficiency. You can feel without crumbling. You can hurt without quitting. You can grieve without forgetting who you are. The third wall is detachment from externals. Not because externals don't matter, but because your peace cannot depend on them. People will misunderstand you. Circumstances will shift. Praise will fade. But none of that has to touch your core. When your identity is built on your principles, not your environment, you become grounded. You can face insult, failure, uncertainty, and keep your balance. Not because you're numb, but because your value isn't on the line. Most people build their lives like a house with no foundation. They construct everything outward, image, reputation, success, hoping those things will make them feel whole. But the Stoic builds inward first, because they know what you haven't faced in yourself, you'll eventually project onto the world. What you haven't resolved in your thinking, you'll try to solve through control. The citadel protects you from that, not by hiding you from the world, but by strengthening your response to it. It gives you space to observe before reacting. It helps you hear criticism without losing your sense of self. It helps you navigate change without collapse. It helps you act from alignment, not approval. That's real power. Not loud, not flashy, but immovable. To build this, you must practice stillness, not just physical quiet, but mental space. Time to reflect, time to question your assumptions, time to return to the center. Without it, you'll live in reaction mode. You'll be ruled by distractions, swayed by trends, and manipulated by whatever stirs your emotions. Stillness gives you access to your real thoughts, not the ones you inherited, not the ones others expect, but your own. And from there, you start refining your inner code. What do I stand for? What do I refuse to compromise? What do I value so deeply that I would hold to it even when it costs me? These answers don't appear all at once. They grow with you. But the act of asking sharpens your mind. The act of listening strengthens your intuition. And slowly, your citadel takes shape, not as a set of rigid rules, but as a living structure that protects what matters most. There will be moments when life shakes everything: loss, failure, betrayal, disappointment. And when that happens, if your peace was built on fragile things, on being liked, on being right, on being in control, it will fall. But if your peace is built on principles, on self-mastery, on clarity, you will bend without breaking. You'll know how to return to yourself even in chaos. You'll know how to stand firm when others fall apart. You'll know how to keep moving, not because things are easy, but because your strength is internal. That's why the Stoics didn't start with purpose. They started with preparation. They didn't chase meaning until they built the character to hold it, because meaning requires weight. If you're not grounded, even the right path will crush you. The citadel is what makes you ready. It's what makes your life strong from the inside out. You stop needing people to understand you. You stop trying to please everyone. You stop fearing rejection because your sense of worth isn't tied to reaction. It's rooted in truth. And once you've built that, you can finally explore your deepest purpose without fear. You can pursue it without becoming attached. You can serve others without being drained. You can lead without needing to control, because you are no longer searching for security in the world. You've already found it within. This is not a destination. It's a practice. You return to the citadel every day. You refine it through every challenge. You reinforce it through every choice. And with each layer you build, you become less reactive, more thoughtful, more steady. That is how you make your mind a place you can trust. That is how you create the strength to carry your purpose, no matter what comes next. And once that's in place, you're not just ready to find meaning, you're ready to live it, without fear, without hesitation, with full presence and full power. Once you've built your inner citadel, once you've grounded yourself in reason, integrity, and emotional clarity, you're no longer ruled by the world outside. You think clearly. You respond intentionally. You know who you are. But now comes the next test, because even the strongest foundation will crack if it's never stressed. Growth doesn't stop with self-awareness. It sharpens under pressure. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. That's why they did something most people today run from. They welcomed discomfort. Not because they enjoyed pain, but because they understood what it revealed. Voluntary discomfort was one of their most powerful practices. They stripped comfort away on purpose. They ate less. They slept on hard surfaces. They wore rough clothing. They gave up luxuries not out of guilt, but out of discipline. Because in doing so, they learned what truly mattered. They saw what they could live without. They discovered how strong their mind could be when their body was challenged. Comfort makes life easier, but it also makes the mind soft. It tells you you're safe when you're actually dependent. It masks your limits by never testing them. But discomfort has no lies. It doesn't flatter you. It exposes what you rely on, what you avoid, and what you fear. And that's exactly why the Stoics leaned into it. Not recklessly, not dramatically, but deliberately, with purpose. When you face discomfort by choice, you reclaim control over how it affects you. You're no longer a victim of unexpected hardship. You've already rehearsed for it. You've already learned how to respond. And in that space, something powerful happens. You begin to burn away what's false. When life is comfortable, it's easy to believe you need more than you do, that you need constant stimulation, constant approval, constant ease. But when you remove those things, your perception clears. You start to see what's essential. You stop confusing convenience with value. You stop thinking your identity is tied to your possessions, your routines, your status. You begin to ask, who am I when everything unnecessary is gone? That question strips you down to your core, and your core is where your true purpose lives. Voluntary discomfort isn't about proving toughness. It's about refining clarity. It's about revealing the parts of yourself that don't depend on anything external. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, practiced poverty. He would go days eating coarse bread, wearing old clothes, and sleeping on the floor. Not because he had to, but because he needed to remember that comfort was not a guarantee. And more importantly, that he could survive without it. He wanted to face the question, is this the condition I so feared? And once you answer that question, fear begins to loosen its grip. The fear of losing what you have, the fear of not having enough, the fear of stepping outside the bubble of convenience. These fears cloud purpose. They push you towards safety instead of growth. They convince you to stay small, to avoid challenge, to protect a version of your life that might not even fulfill you. But discomfort forces confrontation. It says, try living without the thing you cling to. See who you are without it. See what you actually need. And that confrontation is a mirror, one that shows you where you've been hiding, where your values are untested, where your so-called purpose is based on comfort, not contribution. This is why voluntary hardship refines your purpose, because it exposes the difference between what feels good and what is good, between what you want and what you're actually willing to endure for. Anyone can follow a goal when it's easy, but when it gets hard, when the path is steep, the rewards slow, and the validation quiet, what keeps you going? That's the real test. And discomfort brings it to the surface faster than any theory or plan ever could. The Stoics knew that training in adversity builds the muscle to carry meaning. You can't hold something heavy if you've never practiced lifting. You can't lead, serve, build, or guide others if you're constantly shaken by your own internal resistance to pain. Purpose requires resilience, and resilience isn't built in comfort. It's forged in the hard days, the dry seasons, the moments when you have to dig deep with nothing to motivate you but the knowledge that this matters. Voluntary discomfort makes that part of you stronger. It disconnects your identity from comfort and reconnects it to character. It reminds you that you are not your habits, your luxuries, or your routines. You are what you choose to carry when everything extra is gone. This practice doesn't have to be extreme. It's about consistency. Fasting for a day, taking a cold shower, walking instead of driving, saying no to the indulgence, not because you're punishing yourself, but because you're training yourself. Training to remember what's necessary. Training to sit with discomfort without flinching. Training to do hard things by choice so that you can handle them when they're forced upon you. Discomfort reveals how many of your decisions are driven by habit, fear, or convenience. And once you see that, you can start choosing differently. You stop defaulting to the easiest path and start asking, what's the right path? Not for ease, for growth. And here's where the deeper value comes in. When you build the habit of discomfort, you're not just testing your limits. You're learning to walk directly toward the things that scare you, the awkward conversations, the uncertain moves, the difficult responsibilities. You stop avoiding. You start confronting. This confrontation is how purpose sharpens, not by thinking more, but by doing differently. Because as long as you live in a bubble of comfort, you'll keep protecting what's familiar. You'll defend your limitations. But discomfort bursts that bubble. It invites you into a larger self, one that's more grounded, more willing, more capable. It also rewires your instincts. You start to crave clarity over ease. You start to associate growth with the presence of challenge. You become more patient with pain, more open to difficulty. And from that place, you begin to understand that discomfort is not your enemy. It's your compass. It points you to where your next lesson is. It reveals the friction between who you are and who you're becoming. It shows you where your resistance lives and where your attention needs to go. The purpose-refining power of voluntary discomfort is not about self-denial. It's about self-definition. It's about asking, what kind of person do I want to be when things are hard? And then stepping into that version of yourself, not just when you have to, but when you choose to. That kind of intentional practice is rare, but it's what separates people who live on the surface from people who live with depth. Not because they have better tools, but because they've built stronger minds. And once you've walked through discomfort by choice, you begin to see the world differently. You're less shaken by change, less reactive to loss, less dependent on things going your way, and more focused on doing what's right, regardless of how it feels. That's how the Stoics lived, with control over what mattered, with preparation for what hurt, with a deep commitment to becoming someone who could withstand storms without losing direction. And that's available to you, not someday, not in theory, but now, through small, deliberate acts of discomfort that reveal who you are and who you're becoming. You're not doing it to suffer. You're doing it to see clearly, to burn away the false comfort that keeps you stuck, to face the parts of you that only show up under pressure. And in that pressure, you don't break. You refine. You get closer to truth, closer to courage, closer to the life you're here to live. When you start choosing discomfort on purpose, not to suffer, but to grow, something shifts. You stop seeing pain as the enemy. You stop mistaking ease for clarity. And most importantly, you begin to strip away what's not yours, the lies you believed, the habits you picked up without thinking, the dreams you chased that never really belonged to you. Discomfort reveals what you can live without, and it quietly asks, what are you really here to do? This is where the question of telos begins. In Stoic thought, telos is your natural end, your function, your reason for existing. It's not something you invent, it's something you uncover, something that's already written into your nature, waiting to be lived. And if you've ever felt like you were chasing things that never satisfy you, if you've ever felt like success just made you feel more hollow, it's probably because you were following someone else's telos, not your own. Most people never stop to ask if what they're pursuing is actually theirs. They inherit goals from parents, teachers, society, and social media. They aim for status because others do. They chase money because it's what they've been told success looks like. They follow paths already paved because it feels safer than carving their own. But safety isn't purpose, it's just familiarity. And the longer you walk someone else's path, the further you drift from your own. The Stoics rejected this way of living. They believed that every being has a nature, a design that points toward a specific function. A tree is meant to grow, to bear fruit, to reach toward the sun. A horse is meant to run, a knife is meant to cut, and a human being is meant to live in alignment with reason and virtue. But that's only the beginning. Within that universal nature, each person also has a particular nature, a shape, a set of traits, experiences, skills, and challenges that no one else has. And within that unique wiring is the map to your telos, not a job, not a label, but a way of functioning that brings your life into harmony with itself. The feeling of being right where you're supposed to be, doing what you were built for, in a way that serves others and satisfies something deep inside you. To find this, you have to slow down and study yourself, not the surface-level preferences, but the patterns that run deep. What kind of problems do you naturally feel pulled to solve? What kind of work drains you, and what kind of work energizes you, even when it's hard? What moments in your life have made you feel most alive, most useful, most at peace with yourself? These questions aren't meant to give you immediate answers. They're meant to reorient your attention inward, because your telos isn't outside of you. It's not something you find in the world. It's something you see more clearly the quieter you become, the more honest you are about what actually matters to you, not what you're supposed to care about, but what keeps pulling you forward when no one's watching. This clarity can't come from comparison. It doesn't come from seeing what others are doing and copying it. That's how most people lose themselves. They look at someone else's life, someone else's calling, someone else's rewards, and try to force it onto themselves. But if it wasn't built for your nature, it will never fit. It might impress others, it might look successful, but it won't feel true. The Stoics taught that you must live in accordance with your nature, not anyone else's. That means being radically honest about your strengths and weaknesses, your temperament, your instincts, your natural pace, your values. And instead of wishing you were different, you work with what you've been given. That's the real discipline. Not molding yourself into an ideal, but uncovering what's already there and honoring it through action. Finding your telos also means paying attention to resistance. Not all friction is a sign to stop, but some of it is a signal that you're out of alignment. If your work constantly makes you feel disconnected, exhausted, or hollow, it might be because it's not rooted in your telos, and the longer you ignore that, the more you lose touch with yourself. But when you start walking toward your telos, even slowly, everything sharpens. Decisions become easier. Your energy becomes more focused. You stop trying to force motivation because you're no longer pretending. You're acting from what fits you, and that natural fit generates energy that effort alone can't sustain. This process requires humility, because it means letting go of what looks good on paper, letting go of what wins applause, letting go of what other people expected from you, and sometimes it means starting over, choosing a new direction, not because the old one failed, but because it was never really yours. There's no formula for telos, no test that will hand you a neat answer. It's something you discover by watching yourself in motion, by taking action and listening to the feedback life gives you. When you do something and feel drained, notice it. When you serve in a way that leaves you feeling whole, remember it. Over time, those signals point you toward the truth of who you are. And once you start living from that place, you don't need to be told what your purpose is. You feel it. It shows up in how you speak, in how you carry yourself, in the quiet confidence of someone who's no longer trying to prove anything, but simply being what they are. You'll still face doubt. You'll still be tempted to drift. But the more you return to your nature, the easier it becomes to resist what's not for you. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing identity. You move with clarity because you're not trying to be everything. You're just being yourself, fully and faithfully. And that's where purpose becomes sustainable, not as a peak to reach, but as a rhythm to live. When your outer actions reflect your inner design, you experience a kind of peace that doesn't depend on results. You're not seeking fulfillment, you're creating it, step by step, decision by decision. This alignment also deepens your impact. When you live from your telos, you serve others more effectively, because you're not forcing it. You're giving from overflow, not obligation. You're using your unique wiring to contribute in the way only you can. And that contribution, even if it's quiet, is powerful, because it's real. In a world full of borrowed dreams and second-hand ambition, finding your telos is an act of rebellion. It says, I refuse to live someone else's life. I refuse to spend my time chasing things that aren't for me. I choose to pay attention. I choose to live awake. I choose to follow the path that matches who I am, not who I'm expected to be. That choice changes everything. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes it yours, fully yours. And that's the only kind of life worth building. Once you stop chasing borrowed dreams and start aligning your life with your true nature, everything begins to change. You no longer move blindly through roles and routines. You become intentional, present. And with that presence comes clarity. But there's one more layer to unlock, one final filter that reveals what truly matters when even your clearest goals feel blurred. It's the practice the Stoics used to burn through illusion and get to the core of purpose. It's called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of loss. This wasn't about fear. It wasn't about negativity. It was about precision. The Stoics believed that to know what truly matters, you had to be willing to mentally lose it. You had to strip your life of what felt guaranteed, your time, your relationships, your comforts, your plans, and ask what remains, not to make you anxious, to make you awake. Negative visualization sounds counterintuitive at first. Why focus on what could go wrong? Why bring up pain before it happens? But that's exactly the point. Most people avoid thinking about loss because they think it protects them. But it doesn't. It leaves them unprepared. It keeps them numb. It creates a fragile relationship with life, one that breaks easily under stress. The Stoics knew better. They practiced losing in their minds so they could live more fully in reality. Because when you look directly at the things you take for granted, your health, your loved ones, your time, and acknowledge that none of it is promised, you begin to see clearly. You stop sleepwalking through your days. You stop putting off the things that matter. You stop assuming that later will always come. This practice sharpens your priorities with brutal honesty. If you knew tomorrow someone you loved would disappear, how would you speak to them today? If you knew your career would end next month, what would you focus on now? If you knew your own time was running out, would you still spend your days on the same distractions? These questions aren't meant to overwhelm you. They're meant to set you free. Because most people are trapped not by what they've lost, but by what they assume they'll always have. When you visualize the loss of something important, it doesn't diminish your love for it. It deepens it. You stop seeing people as fixtures and start seeing them as gifts. You stop seeing your work as obligation and start seeing it as a privilege. You stop seeing time as an infinite resource and start treating it like the precious fuel it really is. This awareness changes your actions. You become more patient because you know arguments don't last, but regret does. You become more courageous because fear loses its power when you realize how temporary everything is. You become more grateful because you see the value in the simplest moments, a conversation, a walk, a silent presence beside you. Negative visualization is not about obsessing over worst-case scenarios. It's about flipping the lens. Instead of asking, "What do I want more of?" you ask, "What would hurt most to lose?" And from that answer, you work backward. You reverse engineer your life so that every day is built around protecting what matters most. This practice forces you to confront the reality that nothing external is guaranteed. Not your success, not your comfort, not even your next breath. And that realization, if you let it in, becomes the most honest guide you'll ever have. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It points straight at your values and asks, are you living them or just talking about them? People say they value family, but spend their best energy on things that pull them away. People say they value freedom, but structure their lives around chains they've chosen. People say they want to make a difference, but they wait for a time that may never come. Negative visualization removes the waiting. It pushes you to act now, speak now, build now, not out of panic, but out of deep, present gratitude. Because you finally understand what's at stake, not in theory, but in reality. The mind resists this at first. It wants comfort. It wants to believe there's always more time. But when you lean into the practice, something opens. You become less attached to outcomes and more focused on the process. You stop trying to control the future and start pouring yourself fully into the present. You stop hoarding your energy for some imagined later and start using it to shape a meaningful life now. This doesn't mean you become reckless. It means you become selective. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You stop staying silent in rooms where your voice matters. You stop holding back love because of pride or fear. You start showing up like your life is happening now, because it is. The Stoics didn't fear death. They used it as a compass, as a filter, as a reminder that what makes life meaningful is not how long it lasts, but how clearly it's lived. When you practice premeditatio malorum regularly, you train yourself to see through noise, the empty goals, the false urgency, the things you thought were important but aren't. And what's left is what you've been looking for all along. Clarity, not in words, but in feeling, in your gut, in the steady knowing that you're not wasting time, that you're not asleep in your own story. The more you use this practice, the less you fear change. You've already rehearsed loss. You've already faced the temporary nature of all things. So when it happens, you're not shattered. You're prepared. You grieve, yes, but you don't break, because your strength wasn't built on denial. It was built on honesty. This emotional preparation becomes one of the greatest tools in living a life with purpose. You don't build walls around yourself. You build awareness within yourself. You stay open, but you stay awake. And in that awakened state, you make better choices. You speak with more care. You love more fiercely. You let go of petty things. You honor what you have, not because it'll last, but because it won't. Negative visualization is not darkness. It's light. It's what reveals the contrast between what's loud and what's true, what you've been told to want and what you actually value, what society calls success and what your soul recognizes as peace. It's a practice that needs no tools, just time, just stillness, just a willingness to feel what you'd rather avoid. But in that feeling, you find direction, you find your priorities, you find your voice, and most of all, you find the urgency to live, not recklessly, but meaningfully, to align your days with your values, to cut what doesn't matter, to say what needs to be said, to act while you still can. Because when you know how fragile everything is, you stop waiting for clarity. You start living it. Once you begin seeing life through the lens of what could be lost, your choices shift. You stop living on autopilot. You start being fully present. You become protective of your time and deeply aware of what truly matters. But even with that clarity, even with the best priorities and values in place, you will still face moments that shake you. Disruptions, failures, setbacks that knock the wind out of you and make you question everything. And this is where most people stall. They think something's gone wrong. That struggle is a sign they're off track. But the Stoics taught something radically different. They saw struggle not as a wall, but as a doorway. The obstacle is not separate from your purpose. It is your purpose. Marcus Aurelius said it with piercing clarity. What stands in the way becomes the way. That line isn't a metaphor. It's a map. The thing you resist, the thing that feels like it's blocking you, that's exactly where you need to go. Not around it, through it. Most people live with the belief that the ideal life is smooth, uninterrupted, easy. They think if they encounter friction, they must be doing something wrong. But the Stoics saw reality more clearly. They understood that growth only happens under pressure. That discomfort is not a detour, but a signal. It points to the place where you still have something to learn, something to strengthen, something to transform. When life feels hard, the modern instinct is to escape, to complain, to wait for circumstances to change. But the Stoic instinct is to lean in, to ask, why is this here? What is this moment trying to teach me? What in me needs to rise to meet this? This shift in mindset changes everything, because the problem stops being the enemy. It becomes the teacher, not in some poetic, distant way, but in a very real, personal way. Your stress becomes your training. Your resistance becomes your gym. Your failure becomes your forge. And with that awareness, you stop being thrown around by difficulty. You start using it. Every frustration becomes feedback. Every loss becomes instruction. Every delay becomes discipline. The Stoics weren't detached from pain. They were deeply engaged with it. But they met it on their terms. They met it with a mind trained to extract meaning from it. That's why they didn't fall apart when things collapsed. They knew that meaning isn't waiting at the end of an easy path. It's built through contact with real difficulty. Your purpose isn't found by avoiding what's hard. It's found by engaging with it directly. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because that's where the real work lives. Think of the times you've grown most. They didn't come from smooth days or easy wins. They came from tension, from failure, from moments that stretched you beyond what you thought you could hold. That's not coincidence. That's design. Purpose isn't a peaceful destination. It's a process of becoming. And becoming isn't smooth. It's gritty. It's full of friction. It requires you to adapt, to evolve, to keep choosing what's right when everything around you is wrong. Obstacles don't just challenge your plans. They expose your depth. They show you what you're made of. They reveal what you truly believe, what you've really internalized. Not what you say you value, but what you act on when pressure hits. That's why the Stoics didn't fear obstacles. They welcomed them. Not because they liked pain, but because they trusted the process. They trusted that life wouldn't place a challenge in front of them unless it also held a lesson within it. And by facing those challenges, they became more clear, more resilient, more aligned with their purpose. This isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about embracing reality without resistance. When something difficult arises, the Stoic asks, how can I use this? What can I create with this? How can this pain shape me instead of shrink me? You stop seeing life as something that should be easy. You start seeing life as something that is trying to shape you. And your response becomes the most powerful tool you have. Obstacles are not interruptions. They are invitations. They ask you to level up. They ask you to stop coasting. They demand that you bring your full self to the surface. And in doing that, they pull purpose out of you. Because purpose isn't about ease. It's about alignment. You don't find it by avoiding stress. You find it by responding to stress with clarity and courage. When something gets in your way, when plans collapse, when people betray you, when things fall apart, it's easy to react emotionally, to shut down, to rage or withdraw or blame. But the Stoic response is to slow down, to observe, to remember that the obstacle is information, and the way you respond to it defines the kind of person you're becoming. This mindset builds freedom, because you're no longer at the mercy of circumstance. Life can shift, plans can change, people can disappoint you, but you stay grounded, you stay effective, you stay moving, because now you know what stands in the way is the way. This doesn't mean that every struggle is purposeful on its own. The purpose comes from how you meet it, from what you extract from it, from how you turn the moment into momentum. You might not control what happens, but you control what you build from it. Even small daily obstacles, delays, irritations, discomforts can become tools. Every challenge, no matter how small, is a moment to choose. Will you resist this? Will you react emotionally? Or will you use it as a rep, as training, as a reminder of who you are? This is how you rewire your mind, not in theory, but in practice. You take each difficulty and respond with discipline. You take each setback and respond with stability. You take each failure and respond with focus. Over time, this becomes automatic. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" You ask, "What is this preparing me for?" And the answer is, everything. Every obstacle prepares you to hold more, to carry more responsibility, to stay more centered, to live with deeper purpose. Because the person who avoids obstacles lives small. They avoid discomfort. They delay growth. They wait for the path to be smooth. But the person who steps into their challenges, even trembling, becomes someone who can hold a bigger purpose, a bigger impact, a bigger life. Marcus Aurelius ruled through plague, war, and loss, and still he wrote that obstacles weren't setbacks. They were redirections. They revealed the path instead of hiding it. And that mindset is why we still read his words today. You don't need things to be easy. You need to be ready, ready to move forward because of the challenge, not in spite of it. That's how you become useful. That's how you become wise. That's how you find meaning not just in the mountaintops, but in the trenches. And when you begin to live this way, when you stop avoiding the hard parts and start using them, you become powerful in the truest sense. Not because you control life, but because life no longer controls you. You are unshaken, not by being passive, but by being purposeful. So the next time you hit resistance, remember, the block is the path. The difficulty is the signal. What you think is in your way is trying to show you who you really are. And if you're willing to respond with clarity, with presence, with courage, you will transform the obstacle into the very thing that carries you forward. That's not philosophy. That's reality. That's the path, not around, through. Once you stop avoiding obstacles and start transforming them into fuel, you change the way you move through life. You're no longer pulled around by resistance. You don't freeze when things go wrong. You shift, you respond, you continue. Because now you understand that what seems like the problem is part of the path. But even with that strength, even with clarity, discipline, and resolve, there's still one more challenge. One that silently controls how most people experience life. Uncertainty. The unknown terrifies people, not because it's dangerous, but because it can't be controlled. We want guarantees. We want timelines. We want to know before we act that things will work out. But life doesn't give you certainty. It gives you patterns. And the Stoics had a name for that pattern, logos. Logos is not a god. It's not a myth. It's the word they used for the rational structure beneath everything, the order within chaos, the intelligence that flows through nature, through time, through everything that exists. And more than that, it's the part of you that mirrors that structure, your reason, your capacity to think clearly, to observe, to act with intention, even when the world around you is falling apart. The Stoics believed that if you could learn to trust in Logos, not with blind faith, but with inner alignment, you'd never be truly lost. Because while you can't see the full map, you can sense the direction. You can recognize what is in flow with your nature and what is not. You can discern what feels aligned and what feels forced, not from emotion, from wisdom. This mindset changes how you approach life. Instead of forcing your will onto everything, you begin to look for what the moment is asking of you. You begin to notice what's unfolding naturally instead of clinging to what you thought should happen. You stop wrestling with reality and start working with it. That doesn't mean you give up or become passive. It means you become smart. You stop wasting energy resisting what is already happening. You start asking, what's the right way to move through this? Instead of, how can I make this what I want it to be? Trusting Logos means seeing life as a living conversation, not a fixed script. You act, and life responds. Life shifts, and you adjust. You don't panic. You don't shut down. You stay open, curious, ready. You hold your values tightly and your plans loosely. This practice builds resilience on a deeper level, because now you're not just accepting challenges, you're working with the structure that placed them in front of you. You begin to believe that life isn't against you. It's trying to grow you, trying to shape you into the version of yourself that can fulfill your real purpose. And that belief isn't weak. It's the foundation of clarity. Because when you no longer expect things to go your way, you begin to pay attention to the way things are going. You see the doors that are closing as protection, the delays as preparation, the failures as information. Life starts to feel less like chaos and more like communication. The Stoics didn't expect life to follow their preferences. They expected life to follow its own logic, and their job was to align with it, not blindly, but with thoughtfulness. They trained themselves to recognize when their resistance was a sign of ego and when it was a sign of misalignment. They listened not just with their ears, but with their discipline, with their choices. When you live like this, you stop being surprised by difficulty. You start using every moment as a check-in. Is this moment asking me to act or to wait? Is this the time to speak or the time to listen? Am I forcing this out of fear or following it out of trust? That trust doesn't make things easier, but it does make them clearer. Because when you trust the structure of life, you stop needing every answer in advance. You learn to navigate by signal, not control. You become like a sailor who reads the wind, not someone who screams at the storm for not blowing the right way. And this doesn't mean you follow every whim or believe that everything happens for a reason in a superficial way. It means you pay attention. You test what life teaches you. You reflect on how you respond. And over time, you learn to move with integrity, even when you can't see what's ahead. This is why Logos was so central to Stoic philosophy, because it was the reminder that you are not alone in this, that the world is not random, that there is structure, even if it's beyond your full understanding. And your job is not to master the world, it's to master your response to it. When things break down, when plans collapse, when your timeline falls apart, Logos invites you to ask a different question. What now? Not in resignation, but in readiness. Not, why did this happen? But, how can I move forward in a way that honors who I am? This mindset brings peace, not because life gets easier, but because your fight with life ends. You no longer demand that the world bend to your will. You begin to bend with strength, not weakness, with faith in your ability to adapt, with trust in the intelligence of your own reasoned mind. And here's the deeper truth. Your reason, your wisdom, your inner compass is a part of Logos. You're not separate from the structure. You reflect it. That's why clarity feels peaceful, because it's alignment. That's why confusion feels heavy, because it's resistance. So when you don't know what to do next, return to reason. Slow down. Reflect. Ask what your highest self would do, not your most afraid self, not your most frustrated self, but the part of you that sees beyond the moment. That part of you is always there, waiting, ready, clear. And when you act from that place, When your response aligns with truth rather than impulse, you're in sync with the larger pattern. You're not guessing, you're living. This kind of clarity doesn't come from outside advice. It comes from practice, from listening, from observing, from remembering that while you don't control life, you control how well you move with it. And that movement, that inner alignment with the unfolding structure of the world, is what creates peace. Not because you figured everything out, but because you're walking forward without dragging fear behind you. That's what trusting Logos gives you, not answers, but a compass, not a plan, but direction. And when you live from that place, you're no longer reactive. You're responsive. You're not drifting. You're aligned. So let go of needing certainty. Let go of forcing every step. Begin listening to the moment. Begin moving with reason. Begin walking forward, not because you know everything will work out, but because you know how to stay true, no matter what happens. That's how the path reveals itself. That's how purpose takes shape. Not all at once, but one aligned step at a time. When you learn to trust the structure of life, when you stop forcing outcomes and begin responding with calm intention, your path unfolds more clearly. But even with trust in Logos, even with alignment and reflection, there's still one thing that can blur your vision and pull you off course: your own emotions. Not because feelings are bad, but because when they lead instead of follow, they distort your judgment. They flood your mind. They drown your inner compass. This is why the Stoics trained not just for wisdom, not just for action, but for emotional clarity. They called it apatheia. This word is often misunderstood. People hear it and think of apathy, coldness, detachment. But that's not what the Stoics meant. Apatheia is not about becoming numb. It's not about shutting down. It's about becoming free. Free from being ruled by emotion. Free from the storms of fear, jealousy, anger, obsession, and grief when they try to take the wheel. It's not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of control. This level of discipline doesn't come naturally. It has to be cultivated. You begin by watching how emotions rise in you, how quickly they escalate, how they hijack your decisions, how they cause you to say or do things that don't match your values. And you don't shame yourself for that. You study it. You learn to pause. You create space between the spark and the reaction. And in that space, you take back control. Apatheia is that space stretched across your entire life. It gives you the room to think, to breathe, to weigh what matters before you act. Because the truth is, strong emotions often speak the loudest when your purpose is quiet. They overwhelm the still, steady voice of reason. They trick you into reacting, chasing, escaping. They attach your worth to how others treat you, how fast your progress is, or how much comfort you feel. And before you know it, you're not living from purpose. You're living from impulse. The Stoics trained to avoid that trap. They understood that long-term clarity only comes when your emotions are not driving your decisions. That's not to say they ignored their feelings. They acknowledged them, but they did not obey them. They knew that every time you let anger make the choice, or let fear decide your next move, you move further away from your center. Apatheia doesn't remove feeling. It removes domination. When you're ruled by emotion, you become unpredictable. Some days you're driven, other days you're paralyzed. Some moments you're focused, others you're reactive. But when you develop apatheia, you bring consistency. Your actions match your values, not your moods. You don't swing from extreme to extreme. You stay grounded, even in chaos. And this is where true purpose begins to rise. Because once the emotional noise quiets, your deeper voice has space to speak. Your decisions stop being shaped by what you're avoiding and start being shaped by what you're committed to. You stop seeking comfort and start choosing clarity. You stop asking what feels good and start asking what's right. Apatheia becomes the anchor. It keeps you from chasing validation when you feel insecure. It stops you from lashing out when you feel disrespected. It protects your energy when your instinct is to react. And in that stillness, your direction sharpens. This isn't repression, it's refinement. You still feel joy, you still love deeply, you still hurt. But you don't let those feelings build your future. You let reason guide you, and feelings follow. You become someone who acts with intention, not someone who is constantly correcting emotional fallout. Think of how many people are exhausted, not by the work they do, but by the emotions they haven't learned to manage. They carry resentment for years. They relive old arguments. They hold on to every offense. And every ounce of that energy could be used to build, to serve, to grow. But it's tied up in emotional loops. Apatheia untangles those loops. It helps you see your emotions clearly and release the ones that aren't helping. It gives you the discipline to say, yes, I feel this, but I will not let it lead me. And this doesn't make you robotic. It makes you powerful. Because the person who can feel without being controlled is stronger than the person who's always chasing the next emotional fix. In a world obsessed with reacting, apatheia makes you thoughtful. In a culture driven by outrage, it makes you calm. In moments of pressure, it helps you stay close to your values, not your fears. And that's what clarifies purpose more than anything. Not emotion, not inspiration, but steadiness. The ability to keep choosing what aligns with your nature, even when you're tired, even when you're hurt, even when the world tempts you to abandon your principles for something faster, easier, louder. This is where lasting clarity is born, because emotions will always fluctuate, but your core does not. And when you build the discipline to act from your core instead of your feelings, your life starts to make sense. You stop starting over. You stop drifting. You stop breaking promises to yourself. Instead, you become someone who follows through. Someone who doesn't need to be in a perfect mood to do the right thing. Someone who doesn't crumble under stress or spiral after disappointment. Someone who walks with quiet confidence because you know who you are and you don't let your emotions rewrite that every time something goes wrong. That's the strength the Stoics cultivated, not just to think clearly, but to live clearly. Not just to avoid emotional pain, but to build lives that don't collapse every time they feel it. And the truth is, this kind of clarity isn't a gift. It's a skill. It's built through thousands of small moments. Catching yourself before reacting, choosing the pause, writing before speaking, breathing instead of arguing, returning to your principles before your impulses take over. Over time, this becomes your way of being. You become more peaceful, not because life is easy, but because your mind is no longer your enemy. You become more focused, not because distractions disappear, but because you've stopped letting emotions pull your attention away from what matters. This is the kind of emotional discipline that makes purpose sustainable. Because passion fades, energy fluctuates, but clarity, when protected by reason, can carry you through all of it. So if you want to see your path clearly, stop chasing emotional highs. Start mastering emotional stillness, not by numbing yourself, but by leading yourself, with wisdom, with patience, with presence. This is what apatheia gives you. Not an escape from life, but the power to live it fully, without being ruled by the storms that pass through your heart. You remain centered, committed, alive to the moment, but rooted in what doesn't change. And that's where your deepest calling becomes visible, not through noise, but through stillness, not through reaction, but through responsibility, not through emotional chaos, but through disciplined clarity. This is how you stop wandering. This is how you begin living a life that holds its shape, no matter what feelings come and go. When you stop letting emotions lead and begin anchoring your life in steady reason, something powerful happens. You become consistent. Your actions align with your values, not with your mood. Your direction becomes clearer. You don't need motivation to act. You just act. But even with that inner strength, even with deep clarity, purpose can still feel small if it stays trapped in the self. Because real meaning doesn't just rise from looking inward. It expands when you start looking outward, when you realize your life is connected to something larger. This is where the Stoic idea of cosmopolitanism transforms everything. They didn't believe you were just a citizen of your town, your country, or your culture. They believed you belonged to something far bigger, the human community, a shared world, one body with many parts, one purpose with many roles, and they believed that your individual calling wasn't complete unless it served that whole. That doesn't mean erasing your uniqueness. It means anchoring it in service. Not to be liked, not to be approved, but because you understand that the purpose of life is not isolation, it's contribution. When you hold only your own survival as sacred, life becomes small. Every decision is about your comfort, your gain, your name. But when you begin to live with others in mind, your world opens. Your decisions gain weight, your days gain meaning, and your struggles take on new shape, not just as personal lessons, but as preparation to help someone else. This is how you live with true purpose, not by obsessing over your own goals, but by asking what gifts you have that might strengthen the whole. What wisdom you've gained that might guide someone. What pain you've endured that might help another person feel less alone. The Stoics taught that we're all cells in the same body. Just like your hand doesn't compete with your foot, just like your eye doesn't resent your ear, we weren't meant to live in rivalry with each other. We were meant to live in cooperation. And just like each body part has its own function, so does every individual. Your role is different, but it is not separate. When you embrace this truth, you stop trying to prove your worth through personal success. You stop measuring your life by how much you own, how much attention you get, or how far ahead you are. Because your meaning doesn't come from comparison, it comes from contribution. It comes from knowing you showed up for something bigger than yourself. This shift brings peace, because it untangles you from ego. It frees you from the loneliness of individualism. It reminds you that even when life feels heavy, you are part of something shared, and your effort matters, even if no one claps for it. Serving the whole doesn't require fame. It requires presence. It's in the small acts, the patience you offer when someone is struggling, the work you do with care, even when no one notices, the way you treat people who can do nothing for you. These moments echo beyond you. They ripple outward in ways you'll never fully see. And this mindset doesn't erase your individuality. It gives it depth. Your unique perspective, your story, your strengths. They become tools to serve others, not props to decorate your ego. You stop trying to be impressive. You start trying to be useful. This is how the Stoics lived. Marcus Aurelius didn't see himself as a ruler above people. He saw himself as a servant within the larger order. His journal wasn't full of self-congratulation. It was full of reminders to serve with humility, to keep perspective, to remember that his role was temporary and his actions were permanent. When you adopt this worldview, your purpose stops being fragile. because even when your personal goals fall apart, even when your plans are delayed, you still have work to do. You still have people to serve. You still have a way to show up with integrity. And that gives your life a rhythm that isn't dictated by success or failure. Cosmopolitanism also softens the sharp edge of resentment. When you see others as extensions of the same whole, it becomes harder to hate. You begin to understand before you judge. You look for shared humanity instead of flaws. You become less reactive, not because you agree with everyone, but because you know they're on their own path, and your role is not to destroy, but to model a better way. This outlook creates emotional strength. Because when your purpose includes others, you rise beyond your own pain. You don't get stuck in the story of me. You recognize that your suffering might be a doorway to someone else's healing, that your failure might be the example someone needs to keep going, that your silence, your strength, your kindness might be the only light someone sees today. This is how collective purpose gives your life depth. You no longer need the world to validate you. You validate yourself by showing up with purpose, whether the world claps or not. And this doesn't mean becoming selfless to the point of burnout. It means balance. Serving others does not mean abandoning yourself. It means including yourself in the larger structure, honoring your needs while asking, how can my healed self help others heal? How can my clear mind help others see more clearly? The Stoics believed this wasn't just a moral idea, it was nature. Just like bees don't exist outside the hive, just like stars don't shine alone, we weren't built to be isolated. And every time we act with selfishness, we go against that nature. We lose our direction. But every time we serve with intention, we return to our design. We remember that meaning isn't just about what you get, it's about what you give. And what you give doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to change the world. You just have to change your corner of it. With consistency, with courage, with compassion. You begin by asking small but powerful questions. What do people around me need that I'm uniquely equipped to offer? What pain have I overcome that could be used to strengthen others? What skills or insights am I holding back, and why? What kind of presence do I bring into every room I enter? These questions reveal something deeper than achievement. They reveal direction. And when your life starts moving in that direction, something unlocks. You feel more connected, less anxious, less trapped in self-analysis, because you're no longer living only for yourself. You're part of the structure now. You're building something that extends beyond your timeline. And this creates an internal freedom that personal ambition can't give you. When you live for something larger, setbacks don't crush you. They refine you. Criticism doesn't shatter you. It sharpens you. You stay resilient because your life is no longer about performance. It's about presence, about responsibility, about being a part of the whole, not just a part of the noise. This is the power of Stoic cosmopolitanism. It teaches that you matter, not just as an individual, but as a contributor. It teaches that your life doesn't have to be massive to be meaningful. It just has to be aligned with nature, with virtue, with others. And once you begin living from this place, you stop needing the spotlight. You stop trying to impress people who don't understand you. You stop craving applause, because your satisfaction comes from within, from knowing you served well, spoke kindly, built patiently, led with courage. That is the mark of a life well lived, not noise, not attention, but impact, quiet, steady, real. And that's where your purpose expands beyond anything you could have imagined, into a life that touches others, strengthens the whole, and still stays true to you. You've just been through 2 hours of truth. truth that most people never hear, let alone live by. You've seen what it really means to find your purpose, not in titles, not in comfort, not in passion that fades, but in duty, in clarity, in action, in service. You've learned that purpose isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, step by step, decision by decision, by aligning with your nature, embracing discomfort, mastering your emotions, and remembering that you are part of something bigger than yourself. It starts with understanding your inner wiring through oikiosis, accepting your fate with amor fati, and clearing distractions by letting go of the noise of status and approval. You used death, not as fear, but as a compass. You stopped chasing a destination and started living purpose as daily, virtuous rhythm. You saw through the illusion of passion and leaned into reason. You found your role, your responsibilities, and built the inner fortress to hold it all steady. You tested yourself with discomfort, not to suffer, but to strip away what was false. You uncovered your telos, your natural end. You visualized loss, not to panic, but to protect what matters. You stopped seeing obstacles as problems and started seeing them as the way. You trusted the order in chaos and anchored yourself in logos. You tamed your emotions, not to numb, but to act with clean focus. And finally, you stepped out of yourself and into something higher, a purpose that serves not just you, but all of us. This is how you find your purpose. This is how you live it. If this resonated, if something clicked inside you, even a little, drop a comment below and tell me which part hit you the hardest. I want to hear from you, because we're all walking this path together. Your story matters. And if you want more like this, more truth, more strength, more clarity, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on the bell, because your journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning.